The world tells us that like having a big life is like the highest expression of life, right? That like you're supposed to want an empire and you're supposed to want like all of this stuff. And I am no longer interested in having a big life. I am interested in having a deep life. I don't think that scaling is the key to happiness. Like, I don't think that growth and scaling are in any way correlated to having a good time here on this planet. And I know that there are many business owners who have done this, who have done it successfully and who have managed to like be happy and balanced and have a wonderful life and a giant company. And I was not one of them. So I'm more interested in exploring, I guess, what's here and in having the time to go deep on things and to have deep conversations and to like really learn.
Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
I will live every day as if there were a microphone tucked under my tongue.
It's great to get in the game, but don't get in the game till you understand the rules till you're an insider.
Your life changes when you begin having a different conversation in your head.
What we need to do in radically deep problems is propose radically visionary solutions.
Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Greetings everyone, my name is Julie Masters and you are listening to another episode of Inside Influence, in which I delve into the minds of some of the world's most fascinating influencers or experts in influence, or people who have an insider view into a world of influence that we rarely get to see, to get to the bottom of what it really takes to own your voice and then amplify it to drive an industry, a conversation, a movement, or a nation. Now here's today's question. What do you say when you don't know what to say? So much of influence is sold as having the right words, the perfect words at the perfect time. Words that get the result that you want, words that match your intention, and words that result in exactly how you want the other party to feel. Words that hopefully support everyone in reaching a better outcome. And, that's definitely one part of it. However, where that doesn't help really is in those situations where really there are no words, or at least not good ones, where even trying to find the right words feels just like an insult to the magnitude of what is happening. And recently I have found myself, quite frankly, in way too many of those moments. Moments of navigating sickness and loss and grief, where not only will nothing you say make it any better, but everything that you can think of to say feels at the same time irrelevant, small, and just plain pointless. However, ironically, it is those moments that the people in our lives, the people in our world, need us to show up the most. So what do you say when words aren't enough? My guest today on Inside Influence is someone whose work I have returned to time and time again, in moments of my life where the complexity of what I want to say far outstrips my ability to be able to articulate it. One of my favorite bits of this podcast is sometimes just bringing you guests who, although they might not be well known, they might not be names on bookshelves that you would recognize, but whose work I genuinely and consistently share with the people closest in my world. And Emily McDowell is for sure one of those. Emily McDowell is a writer, illustrator, speaker, teacher, entrepreneur, founder, and creative director of M and Friends, a company she began after her own cancer diagnosis, which makes cards and products for the relationships and the lives that we really have, i.e. the ones that are messy and beautiful and tricky and wonderful and a whole bunch of everything in between. In 2015, Emily was named one of Slate's 10 designers who are changing the world. In her own words, she uses her unique breed of insight, design, and humor to bring words to some of the most complicated moments of our life. And it's that mission that has led her to collaborations with Elizabeth Gilbert, Naomi Watts, Sheryl Sandberg. And it was also her first book. There is no good card for this. What to say and do when life gets scary, awful, and unfair to the people that you love, which was co-authored with Dr. Kelsey Crowe. I think, I'm going to put it out there, that this should be required reading for anyone that needs to be in a relationship with another human being. In fact, I'm going to put it out there, it should just be handed out as part of the welcome pack when you enter the maternity ward. More than anything else, Emily embodies the phrase showing up when it is hard. In this conversation, we dance into, through, and between and under what to say when you don't know what to say, and the power of truly showing up for someone in their darkest of times. Why greeting cards aren't designed for actual humans or human emotions, and what led her from her own cancer diagnosis to creating the phenomenon that went on to be Em and Friends. Why no one looks good falling off a horse. I'm just going to leave that one with you. How to sit between what was and what is next, a process that she is deep in the middle of right now, and the difference between thinking your way out and feeling your way through, especially if you're someone like me, where thinking is pretty much all you know how to do. And why she recently quit social media despite having a following in the hundreds of thousands, including the conflict that we both feel about the impact social media has on the world and our contribution as people who use it to share and to put our ideas out there. You know, this episode isn't your usual kind of grab a pen and paper and take notes kind of a structure, although you might. As a conversation, it kind of started off backwards, to be honest, with the space and the questions and the surrender of where she is now, followed by what led her to this place, having built and scaled a global company and conversation around empathy in action. And yet that feels just kind of right for this topic. You know, too often I think we don't talk about what's happening right now until we have a neat and tidy ending, a complete hero's journey, if you like. You know, a triumph at the other side of the wilderness, a sequel to our previous success. Or, and this is the hard one, we can show up for ourselves and the people in our world as a work in progress. You know, ironically, and from first-hand experience recently, it's by taking a deep breath and doing exactly that we end up making the biggest impact. And for those of you who are ready to take your journey in influence to the next level, do not forget to hop onto my website or the show notes and download the latest version of my ebook, The Influencer Code. It covers the 7 areas, and if you want to skip to the end, keep it nice and short and sweet, just the 7 core questions that I have found to be hands down the most pivotal when it comes to fast-tracking your level of influence. Just pop it in your email address and it will be in your inbox in the time it takes to whistle a tune. On that note, sit back, drive safe, cycle on, and sink into both the humanity and the clarity of Emily McDowell. Welcome to the podcast, Emily McDowell. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. It's always such a pleasure. You know, people whose lives I've followed and watched vicariously and whose work I have shared amongst everybody that I know and love when I finally get to see you. And we just had to start pressing record because, you know, as happens every time, we jump straight into a conversation. And I was like, no. Press record,
Save it.
Stop talking. And those are always the best ones. So we press record now. I want to kick off with the question that I always kick off with, which is, you know, what's one idea that's just really influencing your thinking right now, that's made a big impact on you? And again, the reason for this question is that those who are out there who have a radar for great ideas are usually the ones that find them first. So what's impacting your thinking right now?
Well, right now, it's funny the way that you phrase that question, because I have about 5 Post-it notes all over my house that say, stop thinking. And one of the things that I have learned about myself in this last year or so, where I've been going through some major life changes, is that my thinking, so I am a person who historically has worshipped at the altar of the mind, right? Like my mind was how I was able to get praise and solve problems and be good at stuff. And I lived from the neck up for most of my life. And in doing so, I built this career, first an advertising career, and then the last 10 years with the company that I built, where I was completely overriding my nervous system with my mind on a daily basis. And I didn't know it. I did not recognize it until I hit an absolute wall of really being unable to like function and continue and go forward. And so right now I'm finding myself in this, I'm at a real crossroads in my life, and I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do next. And I have a lot of thinking. There's a lot of thinking going on about what I should do or what I could do or like what the world wants me to do or, you know, all of this logic. Like my brain really wants to apply logic to this problem. And I am working really hard to say, okay, brain, like, thank you. Thank you for your input. I'm going to put that over here. And I am going to tune into what does my body want? Like, what does my intuition want? What does my spirit want? Even if it's not logical, even if there isn't, you know, if I cannot back it up with facts, if I like, I have learned, if I haven't learned to pay attention to that information and to see it as real information, I feel like I've learned nothing.
I'm struggling with my brain at the moment because a part of me wants to go into what I wanted to talk to you about, and a part of me just wants to go right here. So I'm going to go right here. Because I deeply resonate with that. And it reminds me of, you know, there's been a couple of times in my life where I've taken an extended break. Nothing's, you know, nothing huge in the scheme of things, you know, a couple of months, 2-3 months. And I find that those moments are actually the hardest for me to get into the place that I know that I need to get into, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, to put the pen down long enough so that the next chapter that you write isn't just a rerun of the last chapter, that you're genuinely starting with a new chapter. But what that takes is it takes being comfortable with a blank page, right?
Yes.
And that is like the hardest thing to be comfortable with, to not just start immediately drawing all over it or handing the pen to somebody else and going, what do you think? Like, this is a blank page, quick fill it. What do you think should be on this page?
Yeah. Yeah. You're good at writing. You know how to, like to fill it up.
Yeah. You know me.
Yep.
What,
You know
what would
me, like,
do?
you know what I'm good at. What would you do? The temptation is just so there. Yeah. For me as well.
And so how have you been sitting with the void? Because there's different phases to the void, right? The fertile void, let's call it that. There's the first phase of the fertile void where there's just recovery from what came before.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there's the next phase that comes after that. Tell me about your experience.
Yeah. So right now, my experience, I'm actually still, as much as I would like to be, into the next stage where it starts to feel like some kind of, like I'm surrounded by fertility, like I'm a seed that's been planted. I still feel like, you know, I'm in surrounded by darkness versus surrounded by earth, if that makes sense, right? Like I'm still in this space of really needing to unwind and undo, and sort of like I am coming off of a period of a 18-year long period, more than that, 19-year long period of working 80-hour weeks on a regularly. And it slowed down a bit in 2021, but then there was also the added sort of emotional, psychic, everything kind of load of knowing that we were selling the company that I started in 2012, called M and Friends, which is a stationery brand, if anyone's listening and not familiar. And so there was that weight was there, even though my actual work hours were reduced last year. And so it's really, I'm also hitting midlife. I'm like deep in perimenopause, kind of nearing, I hope, this menopause transition. And I can't work the way that I used to. Like, even if I wanted to, which I don't, there is nothing in me that wants to work that way anymore. I actually can't. Like, I don't think that my body will do it. You know, I don't have it in me to like sit in front of a computer for 14 hours a day anymore. And so for me, it's been like I've been in this space of just trying as hard, using all of my skills and resources and tools to stay present in what's here, and to not ruminate on the past or project into the future or start or try to problem solve against a future that I don't know what it is yet, but just be here, like just be here, and to enjoy this time. Like I had, I have a consulting income that goes until March, and then I have nothing. And so I had this kind of year. Really, I had this really fortunate situation where I have sort of 15 hours a week of income that I said, okay, this is enough for this year. I am not going to go out and look for more work. I'm not going to try and reinvent. I'm not going to spend this year trying to reinvent or trying to like build something new. I'm just going to like take this gift of time and this, sort of this income that I have and be okay. Like just, and because it'll be a waste. Like what I don't want to do is look back on this year and think like, oh, I could have actually just enjoyed myself. And instead I was stressing out about what was going to come next, when really I have a time to be slow. And so I have been, I had a really good summer. Like I did stuff. I went and saw friends. I traveled. I like hung out with my partner. Like I went to my stepkids' soccer games. Like I did kind of normal life stuff, which sounds so goofy, but coming from the place where like I put work first for so freaking long that it really is, I feel like I am, like I'm a child, trying to learn for the first time kind of how to be a person in many ways. And how to be a kind of a person where it feels good to be in here. Like it feels good to be in this body and in this mind. And so like, I don't know if that answers the question at all, but that's what I've been doing.
I think
yeah.
I think it beautifully answers the question. There's something that I've been thinking about a lot is there's this beautiful, I think it's a Native American proverb, and it talks about taming the wild horses of your mind. And I've been thinking about that a lot, to learn at this age, in my early 40s, mid 40s now, just birthday, to actually think about my mind as, all right, if this tool is my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If I am not this tool, but this tool is my responsibility, then how do I want to work with it? How do I want to treat it? How do I want to hold it? What space do I want to give it? What guidance do I want to give it? That's a very similar to you. I felt like a brain in a jar, just kind of walking around for many, many years. That's a very different relationship with my mind than I have had before. And I would have said I had a very healthy relationship with my mind. My mind was great. Like it was awesome.
I would have been like, yeah, it works great. Like
point and click.
Right.
Give me a problem.
Yeah.
Give me ask me for a strategy. My brain's awesome. It's something I can rely on totally. Until you can't, until it can't solve that problem. It can't solve the problem of your body saying no now. It can't solve the problem of what's going to come next when nothing has been revealed as yet. Yeah. How are you taming those horses? How are you learning to tame those horses?
Well, I've had a meditation practice for about 5 years. That the taming of the horses for me, honestly, it started in 2018 when I hit a wall of just physically, like, I feel like it was like a physical, mental, spiritual, emotional bottom. Like it was just like, I cannot do this anymore. I can't keep going in the same way that I've kept going. And so that was about 4 years ago. I don't understand time right now, pandemic. And in that last 5 years or so, I started to do, in addition to making some like really big sort of changes with how I viewed work and my relationship to work, I also started doing breath work. I started doing somatic therapy. I started doing, I started working out, which in a consistent way, which feels like in a different way than I ever had before. So I started weight training about a year ago, And my whole life, my relationship to exercise has had been, this is something that I must do in order to look different. And so I hated it, because I felt like I just was failing. It was, it was not only was it something that I was failing at in that I was never looking the way that I felt like I was supposed to look, but it was also like set up as a punishment. Like us, so of course I'm going to hate it. And so I've been in this last year entering into this different relationship where like I am doing this, I'm not measuring it, I'm not measuring my success there by how I look. I'm measuring it 100% by like, how do I feel in my body? Am I stronger? Do I feel more confident doing things and experiencing more of the world than I could a year ago? Like, can I do a harder hike and like go see this waterfall that I couldn't go do a year ago, and I got to see the waterfall. And so it's like, it's a byproduct, and it's feeling more. And so so I guess that's a very long way to say, repairing and creating a new kind of relationship with my body in that particular way. I have a meditation practice that, one of the reasons I love meditation is like we all suck at meditation. Like I am a person who historically has measured, like I've only done things for a long time, starting when I was a very little kid, that I was really good at, because excelling at something, like the risk of not being good at something meant the risk that I wouldn't be loved. And so in my head, excelling at things was the way that I got love and praise and felt safe. And so it was unsafe to my nervous system to do stuff that I wasn't good at. And so I just said no. And one of the reasons I love meditation is because everyone sucks at meditation. Like we all, like by the virtue of the fact that we are sentient beings with minds that want to go forward and backward in time, which is one thing that differentiates us from other animals, is that like we are, we're inherently, like meditation is inherently challenging for everybody. And so it's really all about the willingness. Like, are you willing to like sit your ass down and do it or not? And that's what it's about. And so it's very simple in that way. And there is I've taken, you get taught, when meditating, you're observing your thinking, you become this neutral observer. And so what happens when you meditate is you're paying attention to your breath. And then all of a sudden you're like thinking about that thing that you said last Tuesday or whatever. And then you notice, instead of just going off in a spiral, you notice and you say to yourself, thinking. And then you sort of send that, I notice the thinking. And then you're supposed to sort of like send that thought down an imaginary river and go back to your breath. And I have taken that practice and put it into my just daily life. So like I will be, driving my car, I will be like, or I'll be online and I'll see like an ad for someone's, digital course school. And I'll be like, oh my God, I should do a digital course. Like how will I make a living in 2025? I need to make digital courses. Like I need to do that. Like my mind will go into like 17 directions. And then I go thinking, and like put that aside and just try to, return to present moment.
What is me thinking right now? What is the opposite of that? Is it, I'm going to say the word faith without any kind of, connotations attached to it.
Right.
Is the opposite of thinking faith? Is it that it will find
trust, maybe.
Trust.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It will find me. I don't need to chase it, which when you are someone who has built something, scaled something, created something, taken your will, the will of your mind, and turned it into physical reality. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to accept the idea that something is just going to arrive.
Oh, it's so hard that you have to wait and like that it will just happen. You're like, what?
And
yes.
To believe that. And yet what I find both confronting and truthful about that is if I have plotted out, if I looked and I have thought about this, if I plot out every significant moment in my life where things have changed, where something's gone to the next level, where I've changed direction, where something amazing's happened, every significant moment was by no design of my own. I had to show up. I had to show up with good intention. I had to, there's a lot of things that were required for me to meet it where it came. But I could not have and did not come up with a single one of those. They
Yeah.
arrived by virtue of me just showing up, thinking I was doing something else. How can that faith become more a part of our daily lives? Like, how do you let go of that attachment that if it is to be, I must make it be?
It's such a good question. And I think for me, just it's an ongoing practice. And it's also an ongoing practice of like reminding myself what you just said, because the same is true for me. But I would say most of it, I wouldn't say all, but I would say about 90%. And I would also say that for me, when I look back on the sort of pivotal moments of my life, or the things that I did, the sort of, improbable, the successes, the whatever, none of it was anything I could have predicted, right? Like none of it, like you could have put me in a room with a typewriter and 100 years and I never, ever, ever would have written the sentence, I'm going to start a stationery brand and end up on Good Morning America or whatever, like whatever it is, like that never would have, none of that would have come out of my brain. Like my brain would not have been capable of imagining that future.
Which is interesting just of itself, right? Your brain was not capable of imagining that future.
Yeah. So I think about that when I now am in my little brain trying to imagine what my future is in 2025. And I remind myself, like, this has never worked, like, and like, I admire, there are people who are like, I manifested, like I imagined this and I willed my way into it. And and I bent the universe's will to match me, and we operate on the same frequency, and together we co-created this, like, and people do that. And that works for a lot of people, and the manifestation and like, sure. And I also know that for me, that's historically not how my life has gone. And so the trust right now is to just say, like, to just look at my historical evidence, like look at the precedent, and say like, okay, more of this. Like, can you do more of this? And can you also then, now that, you have an awareness now that you didn't have 10 years ago, the last time you went through a massive transition, like, you have an awareness around what you don't want and like what doesn't work for you, and around the fact that there is a lot of cultural pressure, I think, to have, or the world tells us that like having a big life is like the highest expression of life, right? That like you're supposed to want an empire, and you're supposed to want like all of this stuff. And I am no longer interested in having a big life. I am interested in having a deep life, because I had a big life and I hated it.
What's the distinction there? Talk to me about the distinction.
So the distinction in my head is, I don't think that scaling is the key to happiness. Like, I don't think that growth and scaling are in any way correlated to having a good time here on this planet. And in fact, in my experience, they actually were counter to me having a good time here on this planet. And I know that there are many business owners who have done this, who have done it successfully, and who have managed to like be happy and balanced and have a wonderful life and a giant company. And I was not one of them. And for me, I feel all of the stuff that, that the world said was going to make me happy, just like didn't. And so I'm more interested in exploring, I guess, what's here, and in having the time to go deep on things, and to have deep conversations, and to like really learn, and not just be running from place to place, trying to, uphold a system of my own creation in service of like the growth of my thing. And I think, that's what I didn't understand when I started my company was like, I was like, of course, like growth is good. If people want the thing that we make, like, why wouldn't we grow in order to serve them? Like, why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we just like get as big as, like get as big as the demand is? Like, why would we not do that? And I think about it really differently now. I mean, in addition to, there's also like a practical business reason why, like something I didn't learn, something I never knew as an entrepreneur, was that there's also like kind of a sweet spot in terms of like where when your overhead is still pretty low and you like in terms of like your actual revenue and in terms of like how like there is and this is something that I think doesn't get talked about in entrepreneurship, where like you have you grow to when you grow to a certain point, like there'll be a certain point that's kind of a sweet spot where you have like relatively low overhead, and if you're profitable and you're not, it's you don't have to do like this insane constant song and dance to maintain where you're at, and you don't have to, you don't have, you can, there's a point at which you can push past that point, and yes, like you can increase your revenue, like, and this is especially for like a product-based business, which is what I did. You can totally do all these things to increase your revenue, but also your expenses, your overhead is going to grow in a commensurate way. And so you're going to have more staff to manage, you're going to have more moving parts, you're going to have a more complicated infrastructure, you're going to have like all of this stuff, and you'll have more revenue. But how much will that actually impact your bottom line, because all of your expenses and everything else is also going up? And so like at a certain point, what I did was like create way more work for myself with not making a little bit more money, but not like a material amount, not like any life-changing amount of money. It was like, sure, at the end of the day, is our revenue higher? Yes, way higher. But like, is our actual profit higher? Like, not that much,
And it sounds so, I'm going to say it sounds so obvious, but it is not, because I know many, many business owners who are celebrated within the media for being incredible operators, and they are incredible operators and extremely talented, who have got caught in that place. And I think it's because even if you understand business to a degree, which most of us, let's be honest, when we start out on an entrepreneurial journey, we understand business to a degree of, if I give you this and you give me that, and what's that in the middle? Awesome.
Oh yeah,
I'll take
cool.
that thing
Money.
in the middle.
Okay, cool. But like, I hadn't taken math since 10th grade. Like, I didn't, yeah, no.
But you look at what we celebrate. We celebrate, I don't know what your version is, but we have, we have fast growth lists.
Yeah.
We have, top 100 lists.
The Inc. 500. We have all
that.
Yeah.
And it always,
yeah.
Now having grown and scaled a company, it always kind of makes me laugh now in not a good way, because what you're celebrating there is you're celebrating gross revenue. And every single business owner or entrepreneur or venture capitalist that I know don't particularly celebrate gross revenue. We celebrate profit margin. Unless you're in tech, that's a whole different scheme of things right now. But you celebrate profit margin.
Right.
You don't, like, you can make tens of millions of dollars and spend double that.
Exactly.
Why would you be at the top of this success list if you're, making $100 million and spending $2 million? It just doesn't make any sense as a metric.
Well, and
that is the metric we have shoved down our throats from like the beginning. What's your gross revenue?
Yes. And it's also the tech model really hurts that, because all these tech companies that are designed to not be profitable for X number of years, right? And in order to grow their customer base and in order to like set themselves up for future profits. And so you have these companies that are valued at like $1 billion that have never been profitable. And it's like, will they ever be? I don't know. We don't know. And we're going through that right now in the US with Lyft and Uber and all of the delivery services, where all of a sudden their prices have skyrocketed. in the last year. And at first it was like, well, is it the pandemic? Is it gas? Is it this? And like, actually, as it turns out, it's investors going, you guys, we invested in you like 5 years ago, and you've had these artificially low prices for 5 years as a way of growing your customer base. But like, it's time for us to make some money. So we have to prove out your model now. And so everybody's like, am I just going to go back to taking like I should just go back to taking cabs because now there's no difference, you know? And it's been so interesting to see these models that we all sort of heralded, like these services that were heralded as like groundbreaking and, you know, like disruptive. And like, do they actually work when they're not artificially propped up, when their model is not artificially propped up by venture capital? Like, do they actually solve these problems any better than the old solutions? And like, sometimes I think the answer is no. And so it's a bit of a tangent, but that's just been interesting to watch. And so I think it's true. We have this celebration of gross revenue, but like, as a business owner, I will tell you like that it means nothing, you know, like, and it's also a lot of work. Like, it's so much work, like it's so much work to scale. And when you are scaling, when you're scaling for, you know, you like, I have certainly had the experience of looking back and being like, why did I do that? Like, I could have just kept my model really simple and kept it sustainable and gotten a lot of practice at growing, at being the size we were, and therefore gotten more efficient and gotten better at it, and, you know, sort of made my life easier. And ultimately would have ended up with like not with kind of the same amount of money, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't regret any of it, but it has been interesting. It's been such an education.
But I think you have to go through it that way first. You don't have to if you have incredible mentors and people around you. But even then, I think, if I'd have had people whispering in my ear, saying, I still think I would have gone after the holy grail of growth. I still think I would have gone after, no, I have this revenue figure in my head.
Me too.
And
Yep.
this is what I'm shooting for. And you know what? I am endless. You know, how's that for a mantra? I am endless. And so, you know, watch me prove to you all how endless I really am.
Yeah.
And then you reach an end.
Oh, yeah. I felt really endless at like 34. And now, you know, 12 years later, I'm like, oh, I ended. Like, it happened.
see how I ended. Let me go all the ways that I ended.
Turns out.
Yeah. And it's messy. And sometimes you get through it and you stay on the horse, and you get back on the horse and you do it differently and you come up with new ways. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get off the horse, back away from the corral and go, I'm going to be over here.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to go make dinner in the house, you know, or whatever. Like, I am out.
Oh, and not in a kind of a cute way. You know, I'm not going to dismount this horse in my cowboy hat and look really cute and kind of saunter over the house. No, I'm going to slide off this horse, hit the ground on my head, and then I'm going to crawl through the sawdust.
I may spend some time in a hospital. Yeah. Ultimately, eventually, I'll be making dinner in there.
Just, you know, everybody come back later. This is not I'm doing well. Because, you know, I'd love to say that, you know, I've dismounted every horse really beautifully. And actually, most horses I've just dismounted in a really kind of, you know, messy, ridiculous fashion with everybody. Yeah. All my friends stood around me going, ooh,
ooh, right.
Ooh, ouch.
Totally. My friend's like, somebody
open a bottle of wine first. She's going to need it. I just want to go backwards.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I felt like, you know, we went to the end of the journey there and that was the right place to go. But now I just want to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the beginning, but I want to talk about where Em and Friends began and your diagnosis with cancer. And, you know, I'm going to hand this story over to you now, because I know that the version of the story that is real and the version of the story that was reported in the press, you know, ad nauseum, are very different things.
Yeah, they left some stuff out. You know, it's not that it wasn't real. It was just, you know, it was a shortened and media friendly version of the story, which is that I had Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 24, and I had a year of chemo and of radiation. And during that time, I learned, I mean, the hardest part for me about having cancer was not the mortality piece or the fear, like that piece. I think that because I was so young, I was also like, oh, like the fear of death was like not even sort of registering, right? And the same with like losing my hair and like all of these kinds of things that like you hear about that are hard about being sick. It was for me, it was just the loneliness that I felt when people didn't know what to say and people bailed kind of as a result, like turned away and shied away, and people who I had counted on as friends and family and just got so uncomfortable that they didn't know what to say and what to do. And I recovered. I spent a year going through treatment, and I recovered, and I was terrified of what would happen if I got sick again and didn't have insurance. So I had amazing health insurance. I was so lucky, and then I had a kind of health insurance that doesn't exist anymore. It was like I was working in corporate marketing at the time, in a non-creative position, and it was the year 2000. It was sort of the dot-com boom, and so it was like my medical bills were over $1 million, and I paid like 5,000 out of pocket, and it's just unheard of. Like that doesn't happen anymore. And so and my company folded actually while I was in the middle of treatment, so I didn't have a job to go back to. And but I felt like I need insurance, like more than anything else. Like I need a corporate job so that if I get sick again, I can, not, so that I can have that security. Like I know I have insurance. And so I started working in advertising. I went to a year of a portfolio program. And then I worked as an art director, and then I switched and was a copywriter and ultimately a creative director. And I spent 9 years in that business and getting that foundation in how to build a brand and how to think strategically and have a million ideas on demand. And like all of those skills were what then enabled me to start M and Friends. So I was about 9 years into my ad agency career, and I was miserable. And I had been miserable since like year 3. And I had just kept doing it because I just was like, well, I've put so much time and energy in, like, I don't know that I can do anything else. I had all of the stories of like why people why people stay in a job they don't like. And ultimately it just got to the point where I was like, I cannot do this. Like, I can't imagine doing this for like next week, let alone like 20 years from now. And so I quit my last full-time job, and I started to freelance in that business as a transition phase. And then I started thinking, like, what can I do? Like, how can I work for myself? And what do I love to do? And the things that I loved to do were psychology. Like the things that drew me to advertising were this combination of writing and art and psychology. And like, I love thinking about the human condition and how and why we do what we do. And I started thinking about greeting cards as being like, well, greeting cards are the thing that combines all those things. Like, it's a communication tool. It's like, I get to write, I get to draw, I get to do all of this stuff. And in fact, it's like, so, and I always had struggled to find cards that reflected my own reality in the store. Like, I would go to the store and stand there, and all the Mother's Day cards were like this gushing poems. And like, I had a really complicated relationship with my mom, and like every Valentine's Day, like I was always in these sort of like, are we dating? I don't know, like nothing, like on those cards, like never applied. It was just like, and then
this is a card because I feel like we should have a card, but this is
yeah,
not
like
a card
we should,
that
but
defines
this is
us in any
yeah,
way.
yeah. And that card didn't exist until we kind of made one. And then there were, of course, get well cards, which were so horrible. And when I had cancer, there were, there's like a get well soon card, which is weird to get if you might not. You're like, cool, thanks. Like, it's appropriate if you have like a broken leg or something, but it's like, otherwise it's kind of like, is this a challenge? Like, and then there's like, card. And then the only other kind of card were like blank cards, which nobody knew what to write on them. And then cards that were like jokes about having cancer that were so bad, and that were like, that read like they were written by someone at a card company that was assigned to write a card about cancer, like jokes about like getting cute new bras or whatever, breast cancer cards about like, or like cute wigs, or, like things that were just kind of like, this isn't, if you'd actually gone through this, you would know that this is a dumb thing to say. And then there were all the platitudes, all the like, everything happens for a reason, and, that kind of bullshit. And so when I started what became M and Friends on Etsy. I opened an Etsy shop and I did a Valentine, and the Valentine went viral. And it was the Valentine for the person you're kind of dating, but not really. And so it was like the speech, like normally you would give that person a regular card and also a speech, like, oh, I know we're not like together, but it felt weird to not say anything. So like, here's a card. And I just turned that speech into a card. So it was this long text of like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't have a heart on it. And then at the bottom it said, forget it, in like tiny letters, and it was like, basically this is a card saying, hi, forget it. And there was nothing out there like it at the time. And it went like, I put it on Etsy and it just went insanely viral. I printed 50 of them and I figured like, I'll sell 5. I didn't have a following. I didn't have anything. I had a social media, I had a Facebook page, I guess, for my non-existent card business. That was, it had like 50 followers.
What comes
that were
first,
like
the
my
business
friends.
or the Facebook page?
Totally. And, and this was 2011. And like, 2012. And I put it in the shop, and then I actually went to a conference and I started getting all these emails while I was at the conference that were like, where's the card, from people that were like, the card is sold out. The card's sold out. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I had to go look, and it turns out that Etsy had put that card on their Facebook page, and it had gone completely viral. And it was before any of the algorithms changed. So like, you would see stuff from a brand in your feed the way that you would see stuff from a regular person. And it was their most liked and most shared post of that entire year. And it got picked up by like everyone, Vice magazine, front page of Reddit, Cosmo.com, like everything. And I sold 1,200 of that card in 1 week. I had to individually, one by one, to people all over the world. And it was like, people were in like, I'm in South Africa, like, how can I get this? And I was like, just print it out, like, it's a card. Like, I cannot
take a photo of your screen.
Take a photo, right? Like, there are not enough days between now and not, like, I cannot get this to you, like, I like, just and they were like, I'll pay shipping $200. And I was like, it was so funny. And I think this is now very different, right? Like, this was 2012 when people like were just kind of didn't really get like, oh, I can just steal it. Like, it was, like, people were,
where is the physical version?
I know. And like, and so, so I had of course put it up for sale on like February 1st, which, if, and the lesson number 1 in selling any kind of physical product, right, is like, you have to take a week to ship it. So like, you have to sell it far enough in advance of the day that you have to. So I could only sell it. My selling period was only a week, basically, right? So I had a week, and I sold. Did I say 1,200? I meant 1,700. 1,700 is what we sold, one by one, in a week, and I sent them all out with the help of my partner and his 6-year-old son, who was like stuffing cards and envelopes, and I didn't know. I just kept calling the printer and saying, I need more. And so that was actually the card that launched the business. I went and put my head down and did a series of 40 cards and launched them at wholesale. And from the beginning, like, I knew the thing that I really want this to ladder into, this is cards for the relationships we really have. This is the idea. And the thing I want this to ladder into more than anything is changing how we do get well cards. Because get well cards are so dumb, and this is the time when you need a card the most. Like, nobody needs a Halloween card, but like, you need a card when you are at your loneliest and lowest that lets you know that someone loves you. And I knew enough about marketing to know, and this paid off. I mean, this was a risk, but at the time I was like, I'm going to wait a year to launch these, because I think that this company is going to grow. Like, I think that I'm going to be able to make a name for myself here in this industry. And I have to trust that no one is going to do this first. That like, I have this idea, right? And I'm going to launch it in a year. And I'm going to launch it when I have the attention of like some media outlets and some retailers. And like, when I know a little bit more about what I'm doing to be able to get this out into the world. Because if I launched it now, I don't know that anybody would really pay attention to it. Like, I don't know, because who am I? Like, I don't have a, I'm already introducing something that's different and weird. And I was already getting sort of immediate pushback from retailers saying there's too many words on these. These are weird. These are different. And so I wanted to give it, the brand, a minute to do what I sort of knew in my gut that it was going to do before I introduced this whole other layer to it.
I want to just stop you there because there's, we talked about trust and faith. And that's, for a lot of us, you get handed an opportunity and you're like, run, like grab and run as hard as you can before anybody else figures out what this opportunity is or can kind of catch up to your ankles. That's a bold move to send on something that you knew would be huge.
It was. And it was also, it's so funny because looking back, I think that my willingness to do it was as much about naivete as it was about strategy, right? Like, I had this strategy, but had I known what I know now, like if I was doing this now, I don't know that I would have had the guts to do that, because what I know now about trend and the product industry and just like how all that works, like I think that now if I had an idea like that, I would be afraid to sit on it. But I know too much, like I think, and so it was like, honestly, it was a function of not knowing how freaked out to be, or how, like, you know what I mean? Like how like it was this strategy, and it was this ability to trust that came also from a I hadn't been sort of poisoned by seeing what I went on to see. So
you didn't have enough
so it was
information
interesting. I didn't
to know what to be afraid of,
and to know what to worry about, right? And to know that also, like, the thing that also, I was so like, coming from advertising, the hardest thing for me when I made that shift was in advertising. If someone else did something, like if there was an idea that someone else has done and and put out in the world for a campaign or whatever, if you try to do the same thing, like if you rip it off, like, you're a hack and no one will work with you, and like you'll get fired. It's like, you get like this idea of like having quote unquote original ideas is like it's your entire currency as an ad creative, and the awards, you get rewarded and promoted and get jobs based on winning creative awards, and you win creative awards from original thinking. And so, like, the entire industry in that way for creatives is predicated on this idea of like originality. And so there's this huge ownership of like, that's mine, you took it, or like people getting really angry, like, well, so-and-so ripped me off, like, or that agency did that idea like 5 years ago, and then this agency did it. And so it's like, it's nothing, like it doesn't, then it's just, they're just hacks and they're terrible. And so that was the education that I had, in terms of like, that was my education in creativity. And so coming into the world of product was such a weird, terrible, rude awakening, in that what I realized was, like, if you make something that no one else is doing and you put it out in the world and everyone says, oh, I want that, then one season later, everything else is going to look like it. Like, congratulations, you've started a trend. And that's how trend works. And like, there's no moral high ground. Like, there's no, like, people don't have ethical issues about it. Like, there are entire companies that exist on just like trend spotting, taking something that other people are doing and like doing it, and also doing it, and like not trying to do, groundbreaking original stuff, because retailers want things that they know are going to be like proven sellers. And so something that like capitalizes on existing trend, or retailers like, cool, if something is too new and weird, retailers are like, oh, I don't know, I can't risk buying 12 of that and then trying to sell it. Like, what if it doesn't sell? And so it's a completely different mindset coming to creative. And so like, I spent 3 years being really indignant that everyone was ripping me off all the time before realizing, like, duh, dummy, like, no, this is how this works. This is how it works. And so, yes, that's a long story short. I ultimately released Empathy, what became Empathy Cards, what we became most known for, which were our answer to sympathy cards. Um, a little over a year after my brand was launched, maybe a year and a half, and that was what really, sort of snowballed, and the brand doubled in size overnight, and just really, we had been successful and had grown very quickly actually up until that point, and then that just like actually we grew to a point that was difficult to sustain. Like it was so fast, and it was so it was everything was changing like week by week by week in the business, that it was really difficult to keep up with it. And so I spent a couple of years just running after the business.
I just want to talk about your process there for a second, because this one's kind of very present for me at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I went home to the UK, spent a month at home with my family. Hadn't seen my family for 3 years because pandemic. And in that time, had to say goodbye to two members of my family. One that I wasn't able to get back in time to say goodbye to, and the other one who I was able to get back in time to say goodbye to, and who has since passed. And I just want to talk about, because there's obviously something in you that finds it, I'm not going to say the word easy because I don't know, but is able to tap into that, what to say when you don't know what to say. Because I work in a world of words, right? It is my job to come up with the right words. It is my job to work with people on the right words. This is all I think about. And yet, I find myself in those rooms. I find myself, even now with members of family who have lost their brother, father, not knowing what to say, not having those words, sitting there staring at my phone, trying to compose a text message for half an hour, and just ending up with something that sounds ridiculously just not even worth saying, because it's the only thing I can think of that doesn't sound like it might, backfire.
Right.
How do you get there in those moments when we don't know what to say, for moments that we're never prepared for? How do you come up with the words that hit the places that we want to hit in our hearts?
I love this question because this isn't something that I had innately. Like, this is something that I learned, over time. And also I want to say that, but the phrase that you used, having the right words, that is the absolute killer. Like, that's the reason that we feel like we're not good at this, is because we have been conditioned to think that there is some sort of right magical words that we can say that's going to take away somebody's pain, and that's going to like somehow fix it. And I don't know if it's like Pinterest or like Oprah or like what it is, but like there's this idea that like there is going to be that there is something that and that we can't say anything until we can come up with those magical words, and like that if we don't, we are failing. And that there is and there's also this idea that we have to, that the job of those words is to somehow lessen someone's pain. And that's actually not true. So like someone who is in pain, someone who's sick, someone who's lost someone who's in like tremendous amount of pain, they don't need or want you to take that pain away. What they want is to just know that you're there and that you love them and that you support them. And so we have this idea in our heads of like, oh, if I could only like craft the right thing. And that's also where the impulse to do like platitudes, like, oh, they're in a better place, or like everything happens for a reason, or like, it's just to impart like some kind of like philosophical like wisdom, or like a reframe or something, that now people are talking about toxic positivity, which was like not a thing a few years ago. Like, I'm really glad that this is kind of coming up, where it's like bright siding, right? Where people are like, but, oh, they were old, or they were, like they're whatever it is. Life. At least anything that starts with just, or at least, at least you have one healthy child. At least, those things are never helpful. And in fact, what they do is they make the person who is going through the thing feel alienated and feel unheard, and like
they remove the permission, don't they? You have
and like that they're not allowed to grieve, right? That their grief is unwanted, or like that there is not space for them to grieve. And so we actually make it harder than it needs to be because of this belief that there are the right words and that there are the things, when really so much of it is just about being present, and it's about a willingness to listen. So, like, and also be willing to sit in silence, because a lot of people silence, we also, like, Western culture and, in general, for us, like, silence is, we have the phrase awkward silence, like silence is, we're taught that, like, silence is awkward and you should fill it and there should be this constant flow of conversation and, whatever. And actually just being willing to sit in silence is incredibly valuable in a time when someone is going through something, and to not try to fix it, and to not try to, like, spin it, and to not try to do anything except just be there with your energy and your presence, which shows the person, like, I love you.
There's a card that I do know how to copy and paste off my screen. I have learned many useful skills over the years. And if you don't mind, there's one here that I would like to read, because actually
Yeah.
I have sent this card
Oh.
a number of different times, and it's one that really speaks to me. Anyway, I'm going to read it. I'm going to tell you the line that always gets me from it. It's called "What I Want You to Know When Everything Feels Dark." I know you've been struggling lately. In these times when it's hard for you to see the best in yourself, I am keeping a record of everything that makes you incredible. I know how strong and capable you are, how loving, how deserving. Your kindness, wit, and creativity are a permanent part of you. No storm can wash them away. I'm not afraid of the dark, and I'll be here to light your way until your own flame burns bright again. Most of all, I want you to know that you are loved. You are so loved. And the part of that card that always kind of gets me, is I'm not afraid of the dark.
Mm-hmm.
That line.
Yeah.
I remember talking to a friend whose daughter had suffered from anorexia, and she eventually recovered. But we were having a conversation, and she said, and I think I must have asked her the question, how did you respond at the time when it was going on, and how, looking back, what guidance would you give people about how to respond? And she said, you know what? The biggest thing that I wish that I had done at the beginning is made it very clear to her that I am not afraid. This dragon you are fighting, I am not afraid of it.
Yeah.
And she's like, but actually, you're terrified to the core of your bones.
Mm-hmm.
And all she needed to hear from me was, I am not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I can weather the storm with you, because I have you, basically.
I got you. And,
I got you.
And I want to say really quickly that card was actually written by one of our wonderful writers on our team, named Carrie Chapin, who, under my creative direction, but, with me, but like, who, like, that I am, I want to make it clear that I'm not taking personal credit for the writing of that card. And I think one of the reasons that I think it's so effective and so wonderful, it's one of my personal favorites in our collection for that reason, like, that it makes it clear to the person that their darkness is not a burden. That they are, and that their, what they are going through is not that, like, I, the person giving it, are like, I'm not afraid. I'm willing to go here with you. And, like, it's an act of love versus an act of, like, obligation or fear or need or whatever. That it's an act of love. And I think that, like, it reminds me too of, like, the sort of ring theory, which I can't remember who the psychologist is who invented this, but it's essentially the idea that when you are afraid, your child is going through something really scary and it's freaking terrifying. But that you support in and you dump out. So like the innermost ring is the person who's going through the thing, and then the next most outer ring is like the family, like the close family and the friends and the support, and then it's like friends, and then it's like acquaintances, and so as it gets the sort of like concentric circles going away from the person, and the person you say I'm scared to is not the inner, is you don't go in, right? You don't say to the person who's in the thing I'm scared. If you're a acquaintance of the person, you don't say to the mother of the person I'm scared. You can say it, the mother can say it to a friend, but she doesn't say it to her kid. And so it's like the support goes in and then the fear goes out.
Yeah. Which I love that, because that's, if you look at community or network, that's the natural, the washing, I'm just thinking tidal, it comes in, and then as a community, we pull it back out. And then we feed good things in, and then as a community, we pull what doesn't need to be there back out. And it also, the message there is, you don't need to rescue me. Like, you don't need to spend any energy at all thinking about how you need to rescue me or make this pretty for me or somehow shield me from whatever this is.
Yeah, and I think that's an important one too, because I think that a lot of the time what happens when you are, when you're grieving or when you're going through something hard, you end up like, because everyone around you or so many people are so uncomfortable, you end up kind of using your energy to manage the energy of the people around you, like to kind of make it okay. Like I remember, running into like random high school friends and stuff, like people, because I was living in my hometown when I was going through treatment, and like I looked sick, I was bald, I was clearly like going through cancer treatment, and so I would run into these people who I hadn't seen since high school, and they would immediately like start crying. Like people would sort of have these really fear-driven like people would be like, oh my God, like this happened multiple times where people would just have this response that was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, like you're so sick, like I'm so sorry, this must be awful for you, and like they're crying and they're, and so like I would have to be like, it's okay, so you find yourself like sort of comforting that person, which is not really the position that you really ever want to be in, and that is the kind of thing that happens a lot. And so to anything that we can do to sort of make that, to alleviate that, and to take that job off of the person, to have to manage your emotions around the thing, is also like extremely helpful.
And you ended up writing the book with Kelsey Crowe, which is
Correct.
There is no good card for this: what to say and do when life gets scary, awful, and unfair to people you love. What hit home most in writing the book? Is there something that you learned through that process that has stayed with you, that has changed you?
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much in writing this book. Kelsey, my co-author, is an empathy researcher, PhD, and so after the success of the cards, publishers were like, "Oh, we want to do this book. Will you do a book?" And I was like, "Well, the book I wanted," and they said, "Oh, well, just do a book of your cards." And I was like, "Well, that's not really a book. Like the book that I really want to do, the cards exposed a need for people to have a tool to be able to have these conversations and to be able to actually show up for other people. Like people don't know how to do this, and so there needs to be a guide. There needs to be a book, like a down-to-earth, non-religious, just like a very approachable, friendly guide to like how to do this when you don't know what to say and what to do." And I think a big piece of what I learned was really all of the sort of the research behind what we were talking about earlier, which is that you don't actually have to fix someone's pain with your words, and that actually trying to fix someone's pain is the actual wrong approach. And that it's easier, that we make it harder, and that it's easier than that, and that it's really just about being present and the willingness to try, like knowing, like also people are not going to judge you for trying, like for fumbling over your words. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say. It's okay to say that. You're human, and ostensibly this person that you're talking to knows you already, right? And already loves you. And so it's fine to say, I don't know what to say. Like, I love you. I support you. Don't go into this whole spiral of like, I don't know what to say and it stressed me out and like whatever. And then they have to calm you down. Like, no, but like this idea of like, you don't have to, we think that we have to be this, like, that we're supposed to be perfect, that there's like a perfect way. And then we get hung up on, I don't know the perfect way. And then you don't say, and what happens so often is that you don't say anything because you are afraid and it's not perfect. And you're like, when it's perfect, when I find the thing, then I'll say something. And then so much time goes by that it makes it worse and it makes it more awkward. And then you're like, oh shit, on top of that, like now it's been however long and I never reached out. And now I feel guilty on top of not knowing what to say. And then the relationship in many cases just like falls away. And you feel guilty about it and terrible about it like forever, and then the other person feels like, well, shit, they didn't care about me. Like, and that's actually not true. When I was sick and when people turned away, when people just disappeared from my life, my takeaway was, it's because I'm not lovable enough. It's because they don't love me. It's because there's something wrong with me. And the biggest thing in doing this book and in seeing all of this research and in like learning, through Kelsey's modeling and all of what Kelsey has done is like, no, never about me. Like, it's not about that at all. It's about, and so it was healing. It was like profoundly healing for me, to be able to do this book and to really see like, no, this is really a universal problem that's present in so many cultures. It's present in, and it has to do with our own feelings of inadequacy and doesn't reflect how we feel about the person at all. And
I think also conditioning.
Yes.
I'm British. My parents are very British.
Very much. Yes.
Very British. And, in England, I can't speak to other cultures, but in England, there is that cultural conditioning of, what, if it is bad news, we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is good news, we can, happily chat. But if there's bad news, best we don't.
Best we don't go there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Invest any energy in it because, we're just attracting your attention to it and we don't want to do that. And I can remember going through, not a story that I've told publicly before. I remember when I was going through IVF and we had a miscarriage. And I sent my parents an email, and for no other reason, I just couldn't talk about it at that moment. And I sent them an email and I just said, this has just happened. I just wanted to let you know, I'm probably just going to go under the radar for a couple of weeks. And I have to say, as a side part to this story, that my parents are, extraordinarily loving and compassionate human beings. Mm-hmm. And neither of them responded to that email. No response.
Oh my gosh.
And when I talked to them about it later, and I asked them, I was like, well, what happened there? You didn't even respond. And they were like, well, we just, we didn't know what to say. So, yeah. And, again, in that moment, the story that goes through my head is, do you not care? Is that just, have you just read it and gone, not ho-hum, but oh dear, let's move on. Do you want me to feel sad about this? So you don't want to encourage me to feel sad? So I'll get over it quicker if we don't talk about it?
Yes.
Or you don't mention it? And I think that, we are conditioned in various different ways.
Yeah, we're absolutely conditioned.
Leave it alone.
Yes. There's this idea, the conditioning is also, it really extends to like this fear that if I bring it up, it will make it worse. And that's actually, all of the research, like that's the opposite is actually true. That like the person is thinking about their thing like 24/7. Like the person is thinking about their thing, whether it's grief, whether it's an illness that they've been diagnosed with, like whatever they're going through, that thing is on this person's mind. So it's not like they've forgotten about it. They don't have the luxury of forgetting about it. And so you bringing it up to them is not going to like suddenly remind them like, oh my God, it turns out have a terminal illness and I had totally forgotten. Like, nope, it doesn't work that way, but we think it does. And we think like, oh, I'm going to make it worse by talking about it. And actually, no, like talking about it helps them feel seen, and it validates their experience, and it validates their reality. And it's what we need to do. And yes, you're totally right. The conditioning is a huge piece of it.
What's the one thing, if there's somebody listening out there right now who, again, no judgment and no shame, who knows there's someone that they haven't reached out to or someone that they desperately want to reach out to, what, as a way to begin that dialogue?
Just be really honest and say, I've been thinking about you and I didn't reach out. And I didn't reach out because I didn't know what to say, or because I was scared, or because I was worried I would say the wrong thing, or whatever it is. And I just want to let you know that I'm sorry. And I've been thinking of you and I love you and I support you, or, whatever it is that you would say. But I think there's always a place for honesty, and you can't control how someone is going to respond, but like I would, the vast majority of the time that person will be thrilled to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for jumping into these conversations with me. You've been driving an incredible conversation around empathy and quitting and all the parts of life that we jump into, that we fall into, that we crawl our way through, and that there's often no words for, and you've given them words. And I want to personally thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and have seized hold of at least one tool, idea, or mindset that will help you start raising your own level of influence. Now, for those of you who want to take the next step in your journey or would just love a roadmap to becoming the most influential voice, idea, or brand in your space, then I have good news. You can now download the latest updated version of my ebook, The Influencer Code, from my website, juliemasters.com. Also, there's a link in the show notes. Just pop in your email address, and I promise I will not spam you, but it is jam-packed full of ideas, tools, and case studies that I have come across in my now 20 plus years of doing this work. Not to mention the 7 areas and 7 core questions that I have found to be hands down the most valuable when it comes to immediately lifting your ability to make an impact. Download it, keep it, share it, juice it for all it is worth. I hope it makes a massive difference in both your career and your business. Thank you always to my co-founder and the main brain behind this podcast, Lauren Kelly. You kick my butt in all the right ways. Thank you for making it happen. And if you did enjoy the show, then we would love you to share this podcast and leave us a review on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, whatever your platform of choice happens to be. And don't forget to subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode.